Question. What happens when you take a long-term, decompressed comic book storyline that unfolds in many, many issues over a long period of time and makes the protagonist look like a bit of a dirtbag, adapt it for a Disney-approved cartoon series, and condense the whole thing into one episode? Surprisingly, a lot of good stuff. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking X-Men 97 again, and if you're wondering why I'm speaking more softly than usual, it's because I've been nursing a sore throat since I shot the last X-Men 97 video, and I'm trying to preserve my voice. Previously, I covered the premiere in a review that got so long I had to break it into 2 parts. Today we're talking about episode 3. I was going to cover 3 and 4 together, but then I started writing about this one, and I couldn't stop. Last time, I talked a lot about the things I like about the show, and I talked a lot about the problems I think it has. And before I say anything else, I want to stress one thing. I really do love watching this show. It gives me that same feeling of excitement I felt watching the original, falling in love with the X-Men as a little kid. I love having these characters back. I hope the show runs for a long time. That doesn't mean it's perfect. It does have issues. The Magneto stuff, the creepy-ass love triangle, the pacing, the shoddy continuity, and when I get angry talking about these things, it's because I love X-Men the Animated Series and I care about X-Men 97 being as good as it can be. Now I've had a couple weeks to mull it over, and I've kind of come around on some of this stuff. The whole Magneto redemption, I'm still just not buying it. To me, Magneto being a puppet master, pulling everyone's strings and manipulating these events for some mysterious purpose is the only way this story makes sense. Everything just worked out in his favor way too perfectly, way too quickly, and way too conveniently for it to be legit. So yeah, I still think Magneto is up to something. And if not, then it's only a matter of time before he goes back to being a villain anyway, because that's what always happens. The guy can't help himself. And I have a theory about how that might go down, but I'll talk about that another time. The love triangle with Rogue and Gambit, I still wish they weren't doing it. The Rogue Magneto thing is creepy and gross and just plain uncomfortable. Even in the comics, I always hated it. I think it makes them both look bad. It makes Rogue look desperate, it makes Magneto look like a predator. But like it or not, it's here, so might as well make the best of it. I've started to see some possibilities in this. There is an opportunity for character growth for Rogue and Gambit here if the writers are smart about it. And so far, character growth is something the writers seem to want to focus on. I'll get to it. The continuity, there's no getting around this. It's not good. If you were hoping for them to connect every dot with the original show, or even most of the dots, that's not happening. And how it affects your enjoyment of 97 is gonna be up to you. I'm getting used to it, but no one can deny that the continuity gaffes are piling up fast. Personally, I think calling 97 a continuation of the animated series is misleading. If you think of it more as a reimagining of that show, which is loosely based on those events, but also is trying to be its own thing, it's a lot easier to digest. You just need to come to terms with the fact that not everything is going to line up. And the sooner you and I accept that, the sooner we can have fun with this thing. So episode 3 adapts the Madelyne Prior story. Now, if you don't know what that is, there was an arc in the comics. Jean was dead at this time, and Scott met a woman named Madelyne Prior who was a dead ringer for Jean, looked exactly like her. Scott married this woman, had a baby with her, then Jean came back, because comic books, and Scott left his wife and baby to be with Jean. Then it's revealed that Madelyne was a clone of Jean created by Mr. Sinister because he had this theory that combining Scott and Jean's DNA would create the ultimate mutant, and Madelyne went insane, turned evil. I think she made a deal with a demon, and there was all that Inferno stuff. It was a huge thing. But all of that was like years of storytelling, years of comics. This show covered everything in half an hour. I'm not saying they had to drag it out for the whole season, but one episode? That's really pushing it. And you wonder why I'm concerned about the pacing? They are blasting through storylines so fast right now, calling it breakneck would be conservative. I've read the episode descriptions. It looks like things may begin to slow down around mid-season, but we're not there just yet. Never skip the intro of this show. Aside from having one of the best theme songs for anything ever, every new episode they're putting different clips in the intro. Sometimes it's reanimated scenes from the old show, sometimes it's animated scenes from the classic comics. That's a cool touch. I like that a lot. Anyway, the episode. Last time we left off with another Jean arriving at the mansion, so now the X-Men have a pair of jeans.
I don't know about you, but I'm getting a hankering for some double mint gum.
Thanks for that one, comment section. Right off the bat, they've taken some liberties with this, which I'm fine with. I don't want Cyclops being that guy who abandons his family the second his ex shows up. We finally got a Cyclops who's actually pretty cool, and I want to keep it that way. So in the opening scene, they waste no time in discovering that the new Jean is the real Jean, and the one we've been following for the last 2 episodes, and presumably a period of time during the old show, is a clone. By the way, it's very funny to me that the first thing they do is have fake Jean scan real Jean's mind to find out what her deal is when she refused to do that same thing for Magneto. Well, maybe funny isn't the right word. Real Jean's mind is kind of fragmented, we don't really know why, but she is the real one. Fake Jean is mortified at this, appalled that no one believes she's the original, even Scott doesn't know what to think, so she storms off. Down in the lab, Beast is finishing up work on Bishop's armband so he can go back to his own time, but that's not how that works. The armband keeps Bishop in the past, it doesn't send him back to the future. To do that, he just needs to turn the armband off or destroy it. They got it backwards. Whatever. Scott asks if Bishop ever heard anything in his own time about the pair of jeans, but he says that's not really how it works, since time is constantly changing and rewriting itself. And maybe we just shouldn't get into the mechanics of time travel at all, because the more you do that, the easier it's gonna be to screw this up. Even Avengers Endgame couldn't account for all the plot holes that created. But Hank interrupts them. He just figured out who created the fake Jean, because there were so many options when it comes to villains who have been obsessed with Scott and Jean's genetics for years, right? Yeah, it really could be almost anybody, couldn't it? Fake Jean hides out in the baby's room, and she's considering just peacing out again when she hears a voice on the baby monitor. And that can only be one person. For the record, I don't like the new voice. Sinister's original voice was so monstrous and unnerving. This just sounds like typical horror movie stuff. So he gets right to the point. You can call me father, I made you, now it's time for you and the baby to come to me, BT dubs, you don't have a choice. We see via flashback Sinister putting one of those forehead diamond things of his into her, so she's powerless to resist, and so Fake Jean goes full-blown Goblin Queen at the 8.5-minute mark. Wow, they couldn't even wait one full episode. I mean, aren't we skipping a few steps here? Again, pacing. The writers have got to slow down and just let this stuff breathe. But it's as if they don't trust the audience to have an attention span anymore. Man, TikTok has really ruined these people. Not for nothing, but kudos on that character design, because damn, the animators have been peeking into my personal fantasies with that one. Now they just need to make her blonde, have the suit be white instead of black, and Scott will have found the perfect woman for him. Yeah, I'm Team Emma. Don't at me. Gambit, Morph, and Wolverine come out of the danger room, and Morph gives Gambit the business because, hey, look who booked the next training session. It's Rogue and Magneto. And check it out, they've booked a lot of training sessions together. Looks like Rogue's really working on her stamina with the new boss. Wink.
I don't want to.
Oh, shut up, Morph. Just shut the f up. I hate it. I hate it so much. Although, I did appreciate how the Rogue Magneto thing was presented in this episode as something to be horrified of. Yeah, that tracks. So this gets under Gambit's skin real fast. He doesn't want to hear it. He takes off. Wolverine goes to see about half a pair of jeans, leaving Morph alone. And what follows is really cool. Fake Jean goes into everyone's minds telepathically and starts bringing their personal private hells to life. So there's several minutes of straight up nightmare fuel here. And it's really neat how they animated it. It seemed kind of anime inspired with a lot of the imagery. There's tentacles and monsters and horrific creatures. It's really freaky. And what makes it even better is that there's so much character in this. Morph sees Sinister, which if you know Morph, you know that's gonna trigger all sorts of stuff with him. Cyclops sees an evil Xavier telling him what a failure he is. Bishop sees his sister Shard taunting him about not knowing where in time he belongs. Sunspot sees this Miyazaki-esque abomination come out of the TV, turn into his mother and tell him he's a freak and not her son. Oh yeah, Sunspot's back. I don't know why. He disappeared after episode 1. They made it sound like he was going home and now he's just back. Why did he come back? When did he come back? When did this happen? Hello? Writers? Information, please? And here's one that had me beating that vomit emoji like it owes me money. Gambit sees a half-naked Rogue cozying up to a half-naked Magneto. It's aping the imagery of that 90s Jim Lee Savage Land cover, you know the one, and Rogue taunts Gambit to go back to the swamp with the rest of the nasty, thieving critters. I found myself a real man, a real hero. And that was the most loaded part in all of this because it says so much. In the finale of the old show, when Xavier's saying goodbye to everybody, he says to Gambit,
"How often must the scoundrel prove himself a hero before he believes it himself?"
And that's something that's never really been explored before in this series. For all his bravado and cockiness, Gambit doesn't see himself as a good guy, even though he is deep down. He doesn't see himself as being worthy of love and respect. He tries to convince himself that he isn't because he carries around a lot of guilt and regrets and stuff that he keeps hidden. So seeing this, seeing the woman he loves posing intimately with this very powerful and inexplicably respected other man, when he's already worried that there's something going on between them, and she's telling Gambit that she wants nothing to do with him and he's a piece of shit, that's a deep f***ing cut. That's finally going into Gambit's repressed self-hatred and self-esteem issues that the old show never touched on because the comics hadn't fleshed him out yet back then. Stuff like that is why you do scenarios like this one, to really dig around in the characters' heads and find out what their deepest, darkest bugaboos are. I still hate that they're doing this, but use it for character building. That's all I can hope for. The characters all find each other eventually, and Morph spells it out. Dudes, we're in hell. He even says the H word. This scene is not f***ing around. Then it gets even more horrifying. The floor disappears, and they all drop into a literal hellscape. Flying demons, fire, and brimstone. It's absolutely bonkers. I guess that was the writers dropping a nod to the Inferno story, even though they're probably not going to do that one. Appreciate the effort. So they fight these demons, and there's a really badass moment where Cyclops charges Bishop with his optic beams, and then Bishop obliterates all the demons himself. I like Bishop getting that moment, since we're gonna be losing him at least for a while. Then a giant demon master mold rises up out of the fiery eternal pit, only for real Jean to finally appear and put a stop to all this really cool stuff. Thanks, Jean. You fucking buzzkill. So they're freed from their mental hellscape now. Fake Jean walks in with the baby. She anoints herself as the Goblin Queen and beats me which orifice she pulled that name out of. It makes sense in the comics, but when you're condensing so much of it into such a short amount of time, you're gonna lose details like this. She basically tells them all to piss off, to not follow her, and then knocks them all on their asses. I can't believe this has all been one episode, and we're not even halfway through it yet. Later on, everybody's licking their wounds in the lab when Rogue and Magneto stroll in, fresh from their training session. Ugh. Rogue sees that Gambit got banged up and rushes over to him. I'm sorry, I should have been there. He assures her that he's okay, and I like this for a few reasons. It shows that even though this creepy Magneto shit is happening now, Rogue's feelings for Gambit haven't changed, so those are still in play. Also, it shows that Gambit is not being a jerk about this. He doesn't get angry with her, he doesn't snap at them for doing whatever they were doing while the rest of them were getting their souls torn apart. He doesn't make himself the asshole, basically. Like we saw a couple times in the past, and a little bit in episode 2, when Rogue would have an interest in other dudes, romantic or otherwise, Gambit wouldn't necessarily take it in stride. He'd have sort of a knee-jerk, jealous, suspicious reaction to it, but not here. He knows there's something going on, and he's definitely rattled by it, but he's keeping that to himself for now and not treating Rogue any differently. That may change later, I suspect it will, but for now, I like this. He is kind of in denial about it still, but this shows that Gambit's trying to be smart here, and hopefully he's thinking very carefully. Hopefully he'll think long and hard about the best way to handle this situation, lest he inadvertently push Rogue into seeking out something else that's long and hard. God damn you writers for putting this evil in my head!
Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby! Don't you put that on us!
Real Jean is starting to freak out because her head is a mess and she can't control her telepathy. Scott's doubting himself because he can't even protect his own family. And once again, Magneto uses this moment to make himself look like the hero. He's very quick to point out what a monster Sinister is, self-righteously proclaiming that Sinister has plagued the X-Men for far too long, conveniently omitting the fact that during season 4 of the old show, there was a huge multi-part story where Magneto was working against the X-Men with Sinister. F you and your bullshit redemption, old man. See, shit like this is why I'm not buying the Magneto face turn. Not a single fucking word that comes out of his mouth sounds genuine. It's all just obvious lies and half-truths and glossing over all the horrible things he did so he doesn't have to be held accountable for any of it. And for the life of me, I do not understand why any of these characters think he's legit for a second. Gambit's the only one. He's the only one who thinks Magneto's still an asshole, and he's starting to feel like the only sane person in the room because of it. If Gambit is not the one who discovers that Magneto's been up to something really shady here, then somebody done f***ed up. Anyway, Morph knows how to find Sinister because of all the history there, so Magneto takes some of the non-injured X-Men to go fight him. And this brings them to a creepy old church in the dead of night, complete with thunder and lightning for ambiance. And they'd done a pretty damn good job with the darker stuff up until now, but they were dipping into horror cliche a little bit with this one. Not that that's entirely new. I mean, Sinister's origin in the old show was basically a take on Frankenstein. Not a big deal, it just felt like they were trying a little too hard here. So Sinister's got Baby Cable in a back-to-tank looking thing trying to improve him. Meanwhile, the X-Men confront the Goblin Queen, and this sequence is awesome. The only issue is Morph turns into magic. Ilyana Rasputin, the teenage version. Ilyana is still a kid at this point, hasn't been aged up, wouldn't have her soul sword yet, so where is Morph getting this from? Unless it happened during the time jump, and you can't play that card with everything. That aside though, this was pretty badass. This fight scene honestly felt like something out of Castlevania. The animation's great here too, and the best part, the part that had me just tickled pink, Magneto goes at Goblin Queen, and she absolutely destroys him. It's not even a contest. This was a straight up smackdown. She made him look like a chump. And why? Because her control of her environment is not limited to metal. Holy shit! This is something I've always wondered about. In the comics, the cartoons, the movies, everywhere. Why the hell doesn't telekinesis beat magnetism? Magnetism, you control metal. Telekinesis, you control everything. Why is magnetism stronger? That never made sense to me. If you think about it, all things being equal, telekinesis should win. So yeah, the writers get big respect points for this. And seeing Magneto get his shit rocked like that gave me no end of satisfaction. Goblin Queen is in my cool book for life after that one. Back at the mansion, Real Jean is getting worse. She's starting to unravel from all the voices in her head and she can't handle it. Finally, Logan helps her by getting her to focus on him. She comes around and there's this moment of closeness where she realizes how much she means to him. She's kind of astonished and it's a very intimate moment, but then, oh shit, Scott's in trouble. Sorry, Logan, I gotta go. And once again, Logan is left holding his dick with one hand and his participation trophy with the other, because that's the pattern these three have been locked in forever. Sorry, Logan. Now that she's got her shit together, Real Jean engages Fake Jean on the psychic plane, and there's some really fun mind-bending imagery here. I'm not even gonna try to describe it. I really liked it though. We see Jean's origin when her powers first appeared, the day she met Xavier, various other moments from her past, lots of Easter eggs here, and there's a struggle because Real Jean can't remember certain things. It's still not clear why, but ultimately they end on Baby Cable being born, and I guess the purity of that moment breaks the hold that Sinister had on Fake Jean, and she comes to her senses. So she's not insane anymore, not now at least, and her and Scott race to the basement to save the baby. There's a very brief fight with Sinister, but he's no match for the two of them together. Scott blasts the baby out of the back-to-tank, but apparently that was the wrong thing to do because the very thing Sinister was doing to improve Baby Cable is also gonna be bad for him. Somehow. And on that note, Sinister retreats into the shadows and disappears. Just like that. He lost, but he's feeling pretty smug at the same time. And I was kinda stunned that this was all we saw of him. Goblin Queen worked as the final boss here, but Sinister was the one who set this whole thing in motion. He was the cause of everything, and he's barely in the episode. It was such a weird way to do this. And that kinda sucks. I was excited for Sinister. He was such a great villain back in the day, so it is disappointing that he didn't do more here, but I guess I'll take that over the writers screwing him up. And maybe he'll be back later. Maybe there's more to this. Who knows? So Baby Cable is infected with the techno-organic virus, which because they interrupted the process is killing him. Beast doesn't have time to find a cure, but maybe there's a cure in the future. So the decision is made that Bishop will take the kid back to his time period. The thing is though, Bishop is from a few decades in the future. Cable is from 3999. That was well established in the old show. So beats me how they're gonna reconcile this, or maybe they'll just retcon that too, but it's the baby's only shot. Of course, Scott hates this. I won't be like my father and abandon my son, which is not what Corsair did, Scott. He didn't abandon you, he thought you were dead. Damn it, writers, just watch the old show for crying out loud. Scott can't bring himself to do it, so he walks out. Real Gene gives baby Cable a telepathic goodbye message so he'll know how loved he is. It's a sweet moment. And then Bishop takes the kid back to the future, presumably to be fixed up by the Forge of Bishop's time period, unless they're retconning that too. Weird that Bishop is off the board so quickly. They sent him back home without even telling us why he was here in the first place. The writers really skipped over a lot with this, but it might be for the best. Bishop's biggest story in the comics is the X-Trader, but the old show already did that one, so what else is there to do with Bishop, really? It kinda sucks because they made him really cool in these 3 episodes, but I guess I would rather Bishop do this than stick around and be window dressing. Fake Jean quietly leaves the mansion. Her and Real Jean have a brief chat. Real Jean's got her memories back now, and Fake Jean's memories too, so she knows how much Fake Jean has wanted to leave, and they don't know when exactly Sinister switched them, so the whole thing is pretty messed up. My guess is he made the switch during the Beyond Good and Evil 4-parter in season 4, because as funny as it would be, Jean and Scott needing to get married a 3rd time would just be redundant. But Fake Jean is kinda done with all this and wants a life that's her own, so she says to call her Madelyne Prior. Another name that made sense in the comics, but here she just pulls it out of her butt. Minor gripe, I know, I just can't help but notice these things. And it ends with Jean meeting Scott in their destroyed bedroom, standing in the ruination of their entire life, and neither of them know what to say, so they don't say anything. But wait, we're not done yet. There's one more scene where we check in with Storm at some dingy bar in Texas where she meets Forge, because there's a Forge in the present day as well. He claims to be an old friend of Xavier's, which he absolutely wasn't. I think they met once in the Iceman episode of the old show, so they did know each other, but old friends? No, that wasn't a thing. But regardless, Forge wants to help Storm get back what she lost. Weird that he has time to do that when he should be busy running X Factor right now. Is there anything from the 90s cartoon that we're actually keeping? Who knows? My anal retentive nitpicking aside, this was the best episode so far. The show is not perfect. The concerns I've talked about are still there, but it is improving on some things and getting a better handle on itself, so we're heading in the right direction. A big check in the win column is the cast. I prefer the original Sinister voice, but all the other new additions I'm really digging. Jennifer Hale absolutely owned this episode. She was dynamite here. And not all the newbies have had a lot to sink their teeth into yet, but everyone's just really good and solid so far. In terms of animation, this is the best the show has looked yet. Everything was really smooth, and it was super interesting visually with all the telepathic illusions being thrown around. Just a lot of fun to watch, especially with the non-stop Easter eggs they're feeding us. Keep those coming. There's still a lot of attention being paid to character, which is a good sign. Also, they were able to adapt a story that kind of made Cyclops look like a piece of crap in the comics and kept him sympathetic. Kudos on that. But there's still 2 serious issues I'm worried about. Number 1, the continuity gaps are only getting bigger. I'm trying really hard to be okay with that, but when it doesn't stop at small things and they start retconning major details from the old show, I can't help but wonder what we're doing here. And number 2, the pacing is kind of insane right now. Blowing through the entire Madelyne Prior arc in 1 episode just boggles my mind. They had to change or cut out so much just to make it fit, and it felt really rushed and awkward. Imagine how much more you could have gotten out of this if it had been at least a 2-parter. You could have explained the Goblin Queen thing better, given more context for the TO virus. Sinister could have had more than 1 scene. Just saying. So tighten up the continuity and slow the F down already. That's what they need to work on right now. Also, Magneto can f all the way off. No, I will not stop being salty about that. He's still a f***ing villain. Fight me. Bottom line, there are still things I want to see improved, but there were positive signs in this episode. They did some good things here. Now let's keep that going. Thanks so much for watching. Sorry this video was kind of late. Watch out for my thoughts on episode 4, which I'm getting to right after I finish editing this. While you're here, ding that bell icon and follow my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. The links are down there. And don't forget to do all the other YouTube things. Hit that thumbs up, share the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you're still subscribed, and I'll be back with more in just a little bit. See you next time.